Governor Newsom also announced plans to transform San Quentin Prison into a mental health and rehabilitation center. Here to weigh in on that is that move from the governor is Golden State Policy President Melissa Melendez. Melissa, good morning to you.
Good morning, Paul. Happy Monday to you as well.
Hey, tell me about Golden State Policy. Is that I don't think that this is a new gig since we last talked, is it not?
It is a new gig, yes. Since retiring from the Senate, I'm now the president of Golden State Policy Council, and we actually look at and research and study the exact policies that you were talking about in your lead up with Governor Newsom deciding to change San Quentin into a Scandinavian-style rehabilitation center rather than the prison that it is.
Okay, so explain. Does that involve renovating, or is that just you put a new sign outside and it's business as usual? I mean, what all goes into this change?
Well, okay, so let me start off by saying that I do not disagree that we don't do a good job of preparing our inmates for reentry into their communities. So I agree on that point. However, the Democratic Party is all over the map when it comes to crime and punishment and rehabilitation. This idea that Governor Newsom has proposed in his big, press conference, this exact idea was presented in a bill just last year by a Democrat. It was on a smaller scale, though. It would have been a pilot project to see if this actually works. So you can, measure the results and see if this does, in fact, reduce recidivism and allow people to reintegrate into society easier and be more successful. Governor Newsom vetoed that bill and said it was too costly. So now fast forward a year and he takes the bill idea for his own and presents it on a massive scale without having any idea whether or not it would work in California. Did it work in Norway? Sure, it did. Do we know that it will work in California? We don't. So let's perhaps take some smaller steps toward this effort rather than a wholesale change of the entire system.
So, Melissa, oddly enough, we were having this conversation at dinner Saturday night about the Norway system and how once you go behind bars, you're immediately enrolled in classes. And could you describe for our viewers what that system entails?
Well, they have a different system where, their inmates are wearing their own clothing. They have some of them, they have a lot more furniture in their cells. Some of them have TVs. It's much, much different than our system. I will say, though, that the types of crimes committed, for instance, of the people who are in San Quentin are much different than perhaps what takes place in Norway. However, not everybody in our prison system is going to be in there for life. So we recognize that, you have to help people get used to being back in free society again, but you also have to take precautions in the process. And Gavin Newsom, has presented this plan with very little details. He said it would be $20 million to start. We have no idea how much it's going to cost or what it's even going to look like. And I will add that the pilot project program, the bill that was introduced last year, was supported by prison reform advocates, was supported by those who are in our prison systems watching over these inmates. It was bipartisan support. In fact, I voted for the bill when I was in the legislature, and it made more sense to take baby steps. So, again, we have Governor Newsom who makes a big fanfare about this idea that he has. It was actually someone else's idea within his own party. And I will just tell you, it is hard for me to take the Democratic Party seriously when it comes to these issues, because on the one hand, we had a bill in the Public Safety Committee just a few weeks ago to make rape of an incapacitated person or a developmentally disabled person a serious violent felony. The Democrats in the Public Safety Committee shot that bill down and said, we know that type of punishment doesn't work. In the very same committee, they had a Democrat bring forward a bill that was increasing penalties for someone who does damage to another person's property. So they're all over the map when it comes to what they think is a serious crime, what they think isn't a crime, and what should be punished.
Melissa, a lot of folks look at the rising crime rate, and especially innocent people getting conked on the head, with the rise in hate crimes and gun violence. And I'm less concerned about how, I think a lot of people are less concerned about the conditions inside a prison and just getting these violent people off the street. How do you deal with that blowback?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying is there's inconsistency across the board with respect to how they deal with issues of public safety. One breath, this is serious enough that we have to increase penalties if you do property crimes. In the other breath, well, if you rape someone who's been drugged and is completely unconscious, well, that's not a serious penalty. That makes no sense whatsoever. And I think the people of California would agree with that. And that's why even the San Francisco Chronicle, they wrote an article saying, basically Democrats are hypocrites when it comes to these issues of public safety. And they better get it on track because people are starting to see right through this thin veil that they have created, and, supposedly being for criminal justice reform, but also for public safety.
And just lastly, so if this all goes through, then when does San Quentin begin being renovated, or does that?
Paul, I do not know. That is part of the problem when he does these giant press conferences is it's very light on details. It's just this grand idea, a lot of fanfare, a lot of headlines, a lot of news clips, but very short on detail. So I couldn't tell you that. It will have to go through the legislature, but I believe as part of a budget trailer bill, probably they will have to approve the money. What the final cost is, no idea. He just said it would start off at 20 million, but how quickly they would do that, I do know he's already directed CDCR to put a plan in place to start moving out those who are on death row, to move them to other prisons, because of course, he already put a moratorium on the death penalty in California. And so he's already put the plan in place to move them out of there so that he can turn San Quentin into a different type of institution.